Hi, welcome to a special Q&A recording of New Order. It's one of the 50 official selection titles here at the 45th Toronto International Film Festival. It plays as part of our Contemporary World Cinema program, and I want to thank Sun Life for their continuous support. It's been a very different year, as everyone knows. We've been working through the COVID pandemic, and it's been so important to have the continued support of all our partners. So I'm Diana Sanchez. I'm the Senior Director of Film here at TIFF. I'm really excited to be here with our guest today. His name is Michel Franco. He's been here before. His new film is New Order. This film is also eligible for the People's Choice Award. Remember to vote for your favorite films at tiff.net/vote. And Michel, you're joining us from Mexico City. It's great to talk. Last time I was there, we had some great conversations, and now we meet again with your new film, New Order, which
it's always a pleasure to talk with you and to spend time together. I wish I could be there with you and the audience, but this is what we get, and I think we gotta keep celebrating cinema and pushing forward, and I'm happy we're able to do this, and people watching my film, of course.
I'm so excited. You're right, because despite everything, we're continuing, we're moving forward. I know your film will play first at Venice in competition, which is very exciting, and then I'll have a chance to present it here at Toronto. And it's a very different film for you. What number film is this? I know you've made quite a few films.
This is the sixth film I made.
It's the sixth film already. You were here just a couple of years ago. This topic is such a resonant topic right now. When people see the film, they're going to wonder if you have like some sort of sixth sense. Can you tell us about just what brought you to this film? Because it is quite different than your other films.
Well, I hope I'm not entirely having an insight into the future. I hope that's not accurate, because it's quite complicated the way. Well, it's a dystopic movie, of course. I first had the idea to explore something around what's in New Order 6 years ago. I remember I was shooting with Tim Roth, so it was 2014. We were shooting Chronic, and I told Tim, well, we were having ongoing conversations about how the world seemed to be going wrong, like totalitarian governments and far right everywhere, and military getting stronger in some places, and it wasn't going in the right direction. So I think it was already happening, and then of course I made this movie finally set in my own country, in Mexico, and trying to think how it would be if within the near future we fall into the wrong we follow the wrong path, fall into the wrong hands. I don't want to talk about politics because it's not my thing, but of course I think it's a terrible idea to give full control to military and to just hand everything to politicians and military. To me, that's a very bad combination.
Yeah, in the film, there's really, like, you show, the really great disparity between the classes, and I think that's, it's very particular to Latin America. And if you want to talk a bit about that, because it's true, it's very particular to what's happened to the Mexican experience.
When I was talking with Tim, when I was thinking about the way the world was going wrong 6 years ago, and then adding to that conversation social disparity, which was more, Mexico has 60 million poor people, and most Latin American countries have a vast majority of poor people. By poor, I mean they haven't got the basic needs, conditions to make a decent living. And 60 million people in Mexico City, within corruption and adding, all those elements are, since I was a kid, I remember I would keep asking my father and people, is this cannot be okay? You know, there's so many poor people. Why are we privileged? Why such a small percentage of people live a decent life? And that's, of course, a time bomb that's gonna explode at some point. And then, while developing the movie, the yellow vests in France, and recently Black Lives Matter in the US. So it's social disparity. It's also a racial thing, because Mexico is quite also um, dominated by Caucasian, so to speak. Uh, I one's got to be very careful in English, not my first language. But what I'm trying to say is, it's not only social disparity, but Mexicans are also put down because of the color of their skin sometimes, and this all keeps adding into a time bomb. So it's, you have the yellow vest and Black Lives Matter in Hong Kong and Chile last, a few months ago. So it's not only a Mexican thing. Really, the world and societies everywhere have been pushed to extremes where it seems like the dystopia is closer by the day. And then the pandemic only made things worse for the people that were already suffering. So yeah, I don't want to say my film is accurate, but it seems like the right movie for these times, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that's exactly true. One of the things that I found really interesting about it is, one of the things is that nobody wins in this sort of, so, you know, rich or poor, there's no winning at this, and I think that that's what your film speaks to.
That, to me, that's very important, because sometimes people tend to think, oh, the same guys will always win, and the poor will be oppressed. But no, the rich within society, and they, or we have to understand that we are gonna end up losing everything if we don't make an effort to have better, to create better opportunities for everyone. It's a lose-lose situation. Nobody can. And also, something I put a big effort is there's a lot of ambiguity in the movie. When the movie's finished, we don't know, the audience the audience doesn't know what exactly went on with the politicians, or with the, the changing of power. But that's the reality also in Mexico. We never know the
Right.
official story, so to speak. We never know why we're standing where we're standing. We are only puppets, so to speak, of bigger forces that are corrupt, and not really heading on on any kind of direction. So, like you said, everyone loses at the end. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess it's that lack of transparency that you really see. One of the things that, was when you're watching it, it's like, it's gripping, and it's very, stress inducing, it's anxiety producing, and because you are very just matter of fact about the film. Was that on purpose, that matter of factness in your filmmaking?
Mm, I didn't want to treat the I didn't want performances to belong in a genre movie, so to speak. Even if I'm building a dystopia, and of course, I gotta use certain tricks to make the audience believe that the dystopia, it's actually happening, that what I'm portraying on screen is going on. To me, it's only interesting if it's real. To Hopefully, the movie is interesting because we're studying human behavior, and to understand what these people are going through, I think it has to be matter of fact in a big, when we talk about the big picture, and then it has to be very realistic when we talk about the way people relate to each other and how things change because of these bigger situation. I don't know if by matter of fact you were referring to that.
Yeah, it's very you kind of just lay each piece one after the other. You start at the wedding, and then you show all the things that will happen. If basically, I took it almost as a cautionary tale. Right?
It is. I think it is.
You know, the script is laid out, and you take a turn, and then it goes to a conclusion that you're not expecting, but it's just very carefully laid out, step by step, and it all makes sense. It's very clear.
And I think if something close to that happens, and when it happened before in you know, countries that went into the dictatorship path in Latin America, things happen very quickly. Things shift, you know, within a few days, reality, or one day, the fate of the country changes entirely, and the fate of generations to come will be affected by these events. So I think that's, yeah, I mean, certain steps that are portrayed in the movie seem to be going quickly, but that's not too far from reality, actually.
Yeah, because you start in a wedding. You start in a wedding, and where you end, you know, when you're starting the film, you can't imagine the way it's going to end.
We're starting a wedding of upper class, you know, this characters that typically live inside a bubble. So they know the country is shaking, but they feel protected. They feel these things, they're sure these things will never get to them. I remember a lot that scene in The Godfather, the Godfather Part 2, when they're in Cuba, and you remember they're wondering if it's safe to make business in Cuba, and the reply is, "Don't worry, Michael, it's always been safe here. It's always been like this, and nothing will happen," you know. And of course, within those few minutes of the movie, the revolution explodes in Cuba. Things happen like that, and this upper class celebrating a wedding when it's exactly what they shouldn't be doing. And also there's a situation about an employee, a former employee, that comes back to ask for help. It's also a film where we have about 8 main characters. We have like about 8 points of view, or at least 5 main characters, but like 8 points of view that keeps shifting. And each of those characters represent something very specific. And it was hard to say, how do I make the most out of every character without making a stereotypical portrayal of these characters. And that was tough. I hope I succeeded in that, but it was not an easy task.
Yeah, that must have been actually quite difficult to orchestrate with the various actors, and there's a lot of movement, and you know, with the bride. The bride is a really interesting character because she's a likable character, but she's also complicit, and I think that duality, I think that really is apparent.
Thanks, Diana. The bride for me is, of course, she's a central character. If we have to pick one, and the whole movie revolves around one character, is this 25-year-old girl that's getting married, and at the same time she's trying to do things right, but she has a very limited understanding of the country she's living in, of what's going on, of how things can be changed, but she has the will to do it, and at least that's something. And that's, you know, if other characters would have the will, she's naive, yes, absolutely, but having the will is not enough, sadly. Not enough. Yeah.
No, it's totally not enough. And then that former employee that comes at the beginning, it's such a critical character, and you don't realize at first why. So yeah, how did you conceive? Why was that character important for this?
For me, it was important to find a way to connect. I wanted to make a movie about Mexico, about how Mexico. I mean, not only Mexico. It could happen in many other countries, but I'm talking about my country. So how, if Mexico goes wrong, how would it be? And why is it interesting to make such a movie? And it would only be interesting if the story is told from all these points of view. So this former employee worked for the family for many years, so he's connected. He's been present and connected to the upper class for many years, probably most of his life by working for them. And he thinks that when time comes and the time comes when he needs help, he should be able to rely on all those loyal years of service. But that's not how his former employee patrons see it. They think, I've done my share, I've always been fair, and I can help you a little bit, but I'm not obliged to solve your, it's not my responsibility to solve your problem. So, and he comes at the day of the wedding of this young girl, desperately asking for money, and some people even think he's making up the story. The audience, we know he's not.
Yeah.
But what's complex about this movie is that I've showed it to a few friends while I was editing, and some of them would say, you cannot blame them for not helping him entirely. He comes out of left field with this demand. Would I trust him or not? And my friends were telling this, on a private conversation. But what goes on every on the mind of every member of the audience? How would they act? And I'm not sure most of us in the audience would help this guy. I mean, it's easy while eating your popcorn to say, Jesus, you should have helped him. It's not so hard. But think of your actual life. How would you handle that situation? And then it's tricky because the reason why the dystopia or this chaotic scenario is closer by the day is because we're all making the wrong decisions. We're all behaving on a selfish way. So I think, altogether the movie does have a positive. I think it's hard to say what's positive about this movie. Well, definitely the saying, let's not arrive to that point. Let's change the way we're behaving.
Yeah, no, it's very powerful. There's one last thing we wanted to ask you about, because one of the things I found so fascinating, it's also complex to film to film. Can you just give us one anecdote before you go with one of the challenges? Because I was watching this film, I'm like, wow, this is such a complicated piece with the wedding, the protests. Can you tell us just one of those challenges?
It was hard to write, and of course even harder to shoot it, because all my previous movies are intimate. I'm mostly in a room with a camera and 2-3 actors, and that's my thing. Once I decided to make this movie, it's like, it's gonna be hard. Am I able to pull this off? So it was only possible because of the crew, the production designer, the cinematographer, of course, VFX. And I had no idea. I've never done VFX to this extent. I never shot. There's 3,000 extras in the movie. We had to close down main streets in Mexico, like Reforma, big avenues, and either fill them with, have full control of them and fill them with our extras and disaster elements, and then hand them to the VFX people. So it was all very chaotic. One anecdote was how complicated it was to close down Reforma, because we had the permits and we were there at 6 o'clock in the morning. We were supposed to shoot, with the first light of the day. And they told us, oh no, better go to the other end of the city to shoot that other thing you have to shoot. So we did. And to make a long story short, the day kept advancing, and by 1 o'clock we were still not shooting, and they would keep telling us not yet because, you know, giving us bullshit reasons. The policeman and the film commission of Mexico. And finally, I approached them and I told them, so you really won't let me shoot, right? You don't want me to shoot. And they said, and one of them came out and said, that's right. We won't let you shoot. I said, why? We have the permit. Yeah, but those military elements and those corpses, what's going on? What film are you doing? Which, by the way, is not their concern, right? But I said, okay, if I take out the military elements, and my crew was about to pick a fight with them because, you know, and I said, it's not about who's right or wrong. I just want my shot, you know, like a director. I just need my shot. So I told him, if I take out the military elements and the corpses, would you let me shoot? Everyone was surprised that I was, you know, negotiating that way. They said yes. I knew I would put them back in VFX, you know, in post-production. So finally, I got to shoot half of the shot because when they saw even what we did with less elements, they were very concerned. So that's one anecdote. And the other is for the scene where the guys, the invaders jump into the wedding and there's a shooting, and it's a long shot plan sequence that, you know, was complicated to orchestrate because they're shooting, there's a lot of extras, there's a lot. Normally we would have cut, but I like these long shots because they give a sense of reality. And we had to rehearse that every Sunday for a month with the cast and with the camera, and, you know, it was very hard for me, Diana. This was I was totally outside of my comfort zone, and it was very challenging.
Michel, thank you so much, because we're going to be showing the film at TIFF. People are seeing it now. I hope that we get to hang out with your next film here, and I'm sure we'll meet sometime this year to talk more about New Order. I'm really excited to show the film at TIFF, and I wish you, I can't wait to actually be able to talk more about this in person.
I'm very happy too. Thanks for picking the film, because I know it's a shorter selection, and I'm lucky to be screening New Order, and I'll surely be there next year with, you know, we'll be together. Yeah.
Perfecto.
Thank you. Gracias.
Gracias.